All right, let's talk about something that pretty much every engineering manager has faced. How do you give feedback to your team without it blowing up in your face? Well, today we're going to break down a really simple but powerful system that does exactly that.
So, when you think about giving feedback to your engineers, does it kind of make your stomach clench a little bit? You know you have to have the conversation, you know it's all about making things better, but you also know it can go south, like really fast.
Because, let's be real, that's exactly what it can feel like, right? You're choosing your words so carefully, trying to snip the right wire, because you know one wrong move, one little hint of the wrong tone, and boom, the whole thing just explodes.
And you know the reactions, don't you? You get that immediate wall of defensiveness, or the long, rambling explanation of why it wasn't their fault. Or they argue, or worse, they just completely shut down. And of course, my personal favorite, the classic yeah, but, which is just code for, I'm about to tell you why you're wrong.
But what if I told you there's a way to skip all of that? A method that gets you to a calm, clear, and actually productive conversation. And here's the best part. It takes about 90 seconds. Seriously.
Okay, so before we get to the solution, we have to understand the problem. Why do these conversations fail so often? The reason is actually pretty simple, but it's a huge deal.
This right here, this is the whole game. Think about it. As the manager, you're usually coming in a little frustrated, maybe even annoyed. You're emotional. The engineer, they're in a logical headspace until you criticize their work, which feels personal. And then their brain just goes into threat mode. The secret is to flip that whole dynamic on its head.
And this is where we usually mess up. We talk too much, we give way too much backstory, and the actual point gets lost. The feedback lands like a personal attack instead of an observation about the work. Our own emotions leak into our voice. And then, at the end of it all, we don't even give a clear next step, so it just feels like you're complaining, not coaching.
So, how do we fix this? Let's get right into the framework. It's called the 90-second feedback loop, and it is a total game changer.
The whole idea behind this loop is to strip out the emotion and the pressure. You're delivering your message from a calm, neutral place so that it can be heard with clarity. The goal is to talk about the problem without setting off all those defensive alarms in their head.
And it's just 3 super simple, easy-to-remember steps. Number 1, the neutral fact. Number 2, the business impact. And number 3, the forward action. That's the whole thing. Let's break down each one.
All right, step 1. This is the foundation for the entire conversation, and you absolutely have to get this right. You have to start with something that is observable, totally objective, and has zero judgment attached to it.
Just look at the difference here. Saying you weren't collaborative, that's your opinion, your interpretation, and it immediately makes someone want to argue. But saying, in the last 2 stand-ups you didn't share status updates, well, that's a fact. It's like security camera footage. You can't argue with it. It's just data.
And here's the neuroscience behind it, which is so cool. Facts actually have a calming effect on the brain. They don't threaten our ego. Judgment, though, that's a direct signal to our brain's threat detector. So by starting with a simple fact, you keep the conversation rational.
Okay, so you've laid out the neutral fact. Now what? Step 2 is where you give that fact meaning. But, and this is key, it's not emotional meaning. You connect it to a real, tangible consequence for the business or the project.
Look at this comparison. This frustrated the team is about feelings. Feelings are subjective, and honestly, they can be dismissed. But this delay created 17 blocking hours and pushed the sprint boundary by a day. Now you're talking. That is pure data. You're speaking the language of systems, metrics, and problems to be solved, an engineer's language.
This is the mantra for step 2. It's not about how you feel about the situation, it's about the impact on the work. When you focus on the metrics, the risk, the bottlenecks, you're framing it as an interesting problem that you need their big brain to help solve.
So you've stated the fact, you've shown the business impact, now it's time to bring it home with the final and most crucial step. You have to give a clear path forward, because remember, feedback without direction is just complaining. I mean, how many times have we heard or said, you need to do better? It's completely useless. It's vague, it's lazy, and it leaves the other person guessing. But for the next sprint, post a 3-point async status by 10 a.m. daily. That is crystal clear. It's specific, it's measurable, and it's a small, achievable change. There's no guesswork.
Now, when you put all 3 of these steps together, the neutral fact, the business impact, the forward action, something really amazing happens.
The whole vibe of the conversation shifts. You go from a tense confrontation to just problem solving.
And here's the psychology of why it's so effective. First, you're practicing emotional containment, because you stay calm, they stay calm. Second, facts separate their behavior from their identity so their ego doesn't get triggered. Third, the business impact keeps their logical brain switched on. And finally, that clear forward action gives them an easy win, turning this whole thing into a real positive change.
Think about it. This whole system is designed to help you completely sidestep all the stuff we hate. You avoid the drama, the endless debates, the defensiveness, and that awful emotional shutdown. You're literally building a conversation that is engineered to succeed.
And what do you get instead? You get all the good stuff. You get alignment. You get mutual respect because you treated them like a professional. You get actual improvement. You get agreement. And maybe most important of all, you actually build trust.
And if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. The purpose of feedback is not to make someone feel bad. It's to help them find a better path. It shouldn't create fear. It should create clear, confident direction. So I want you to think about it right now. What's that one tricky conversation you've been avoiding? How could you use this 90-second loop, neutral fact, business impact, forward action, to completely transform that talk sometime this week?